Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. So happy to see you all. Today we are picking up with part 2 of our Warhammer 40k read-along in the book Titandeath. So, last time we finished, I think, the first 3 or so chapters. We are going to pick up there. Previously on, we have an all-female Titan Legion, girl bossing around. They're getting deployed to this place called Beta Garmin, which is literally designed to be like just a stop point between Terra and the rest of the traitor armies. And so their goal is to basically buy as much time as possible for increased efforts to defeat the traitors on Earth. So they've sent all their Titan legions basically to go fight there, and we are following specifically the Legio Solaria, which is this all-female legion led by a real girl boss, and that's kind of where we were. So just a friendly reminder that this is not an audiobook. Feel free to ask questions and make comments, and I will interact with chat accordingly. Just typing that up as a message to put in the thingy. Yep. Today we are going to be, I forgot that Rogue Trader was a game for a while, so I actually have the Rogue Trader OST to be our VGM today rather than the Dark Tide one. So it should be a bit more subdued than the Dark Tide one. So yeah, please feel free to kick back and enjoy the ride. So here we go. Let me know if it's too loud or too quiet. Because I have to turn it down because it's too loud for me. Okay. So we begin here. Warp translation complete, said the watch officer. All vessels are reported in, none lost. No major incidents. Omnis Sire be praised. Battle Group Solaria sails with the Machine God's blessing. I guess it's still just more that guy talking. He moves aside the obstacles to victory and guides our hands to the hilts of our weapons. Damn it, this is a fucking tech priest. One problem with this formatting, it's harder to tell the quote section. My bad. He moves aside the obstacles to victory and guides our hands to the hilt of our weapons, intoned the trans-mechanic Prometheus. There were a large number of magi in the crew, most of them so enmeshed in the controls of the subsystems they commanded that they rarely left their posts. Few of the ship's personnel were baseline humans. The majority were servitor cyborgs slaved directly to the wills of the trans-mechanics. The future liberals want, slaved away to trans-mechanics. The rest were adepts of the machine cult to a man. Okay, I don't know the gender of this person, so I'm just gonna say. Raise void shields, engage long-range auger sweep, commanded the fleet's Navicorus. Carl Koyman, I guess, with a name like Carl, probably guy. As Legio command vessel, the Tantamon served the fleet as the flagship, although Metallo Mutandis was a more powerful craft. No returns on Auspex. The way is clear. We arrive unanticipated, said, reported an augury transmechanic. I'll believe that when I have the evidence of my own eyes, growled Koyman. Open the shutters. Let's see what's waiting for us here. The Tantaman's shipmaster was a gruff soul. Unusually for a senior vassal of a Forge World, Koyman was mostly flesh. His augmetics restricted to a single input port in his right temple and permanently embedded hardpoints for the haptic command glove he wore while on duty. Although he was born of a Mechanicum-tied Void clan, he was stout and heavy-boned, the beneficiary of life on a ship with functioning gravity plating. He was bald, white-bearded, clad in a uniform similar to that of an officer of the Imperial Navy. Although his allegiance to Mars rather than Terra was clear from his cog and skull badges and his uniform's crimson cloth. The Oculus shutters slid back section by section. Warm light from the Garmin cluster crept across the bridge as dawn moves around an open door. The forward 3 drop ships stretched away from the command deck, their bland orange exteriors giving little hint at the majesty of the god machines they carried. Ranging ahead were the crenellated glories of the Tantaman's escorts. A hush fell over the assembled Principe. Esha felt their awe. The sight of such a fleet made them all feel invincible. Lo, we are the mighty, for we carry with us the knowledge of all things, quoted Toza Mindev from Tigerian scripture. The knowledge of motion, the knowledge of might, the knowledge of the gun. Esha nodded slowly, enjoying the spectacle of the machine god's power laid out for her. I'll take the gun over the blessing, said Jahani Jahan flatly. This'll be a hard fight. One worth fighting. The machine god is generous. We will be victorious. In not so many days, the Legio will walk again for the purpose it was made. Esha said. She spoke respectfully, but without warmth. Relations between her and Jahani had been strained for years. This war will not last forever. The traitors will be vanquished and the damage undone. By the will of the 3 who is one, so it shall be. The war is not yet done, Mistress Principe, Koyman said loudly. Although by every member of the Trinity of Omnissiah, Machine God and Motive Force, I pray you are right. We have our orders, from Magos Principia Militaris, Gotin Mu Cassanius, now ratified by the Great Mother herself. All ships are to make full speed to Theta Garmin 5 immediately. Perhaps there you can hasten the end of this heresy personally. The Garmin cluster was popularly known by the name Beta Garmin. As an astromancer would point out that Beta Garmin was but one star in a subsector of several dozen systems, blessed with inhabited worlds, but names spring from power. Following the collapse of the first great stellar empire of mankind, the second planet of Beta Garmin had come to be the capital of the region, thereafter the seat of government for some 100 inhabited planets, moons, and outposts, and so the name stuck. Take a little chance to hydrate. Okay. There were many remarkable things about the Garmin cluster. Most significant was that its worlds had survived the Age of Strife, with much of their technology and population intact. Their nearness obviated the need for warp travel in all but the most pressing of circumstances, and when it could not be avoided, the journeys were short. When the warp was inaccessible, as it had been for lengthy periods during Old Night, then real space transit could be made between the nearest systems within a few years or so. Furthermore, Beta Garmin sat upon a confluence of stable routes through the warp and remained relatively calm while Tempest raged across the Imperium. Sheltered from the worst the terrible era inflicted upon humanity, the cluster remained a haven for millennia. When the Imperium arrived early during its great outward expansion, the Garmanites reached compliance without a drop of blood shed. They were enthusiastic adopters of Imperium, and were repaid mightily for their loyalty. Throughout the Great Crusade, the Garmin Cluster's warp routes meant it stayed a major staging post for the Imperial war machine, and riches consequently flooded into the subsector. Its merchants prospered, its worlds were transformed, its rulers enjoyed considerable influence in Segmentum government. Their voices were heard on Terra, in the Navy, and in the armies of the Imperium at the highest level. A golden age beckoned. No longer. From the bridge, the cluster looked peaceful, but Beta Garban was the single largest war zone in the entire galaxy. Not even the most destructive wars of mankind could perturb the cosmos. All the species' violence was swallowed up by the immensity of space and made insignificant by distance. The shipyards of Theta Garmin 5 were 3 days' travel sunwards. At the far remove of a system's edge, a sun appears only slightly larger than its sibling stars. Theta Garmin's worlds were glints in the void, arrayed across the firmaments in an ecliptical line. All grew quickly as the fleet gathered speed. The diamond chips of worlds burgeoned into bright coins of albedo shine, supplemented by the twinkles of plasma weapon fire. The blink and miss of pulse of Lasbless and the firefly glows of reactor explosions. Battle awaited the Legio. Esha Ani Mohana longed for it. Chapter 4. Lord Dorn's Call. Nope. The Legio gathered in the briefing hall at the rear of the Tantaman Strategium deck. Half the room was occupied and brightly lit by warm yellow lumens. The half opposite was shadowed and is yet empty, but for priests working over the hololithic arrays to ensure the transmission quality the Great Mother demanded. Full spectrum comms integration had been ordered by Mohana Mankata Vai. In the lit half, second maniple waited. Durana Fall with them as always. 5th, 7th, 8th, and 10th maniples were all in their own groups, with the mixed unit of 11th, 13th maniple at the end of the line. All units stood to attention in 2 short ranks behind their Principe Majoris. The day mechanics and plasmancers of the god engines were also present, gathered with their own kind in a loose crowd behind the Titan crews. And finally the Strategos of the Legio, their officers and their subordinates forming a block of dun-colored uniforms near the gates to the Strategium proper. The Tantamon, Artemisia, and the lesser transports moved into closer proximity with one another to ensure perfect data pulse exchange. At the prayers of the machine priests, the communications matrix fell into perfect alignment. Hunter routines spread out from Digilymph. Gotta love made up 40k words. Digilymph nodes to swim code streams flowing through the networked cogitators and servitors supporting the fleet infosphere. They passed over the void into each other's territories, their subroutines emitting warding cantrips at every data portal. Lessons had been learnt from the enemy's assault on Calth and elsewhere. No enemy could penetrate the infospheric network surrounding the ships, not by technological or sorcerous means, or any combination of the two. Unauthorized entry would be quickly isolated and shut down. The Tantamon Strategium was large and ornate throughout. Its briefing hall was as finely decorated as a prince's ballroom, oval in shape and clad with polished serpentine. Statues of the founding mothers filled niches around the hall's circuit. The largest depicting Mohana Mankata Vai stood at the oval's vertex opposite the gates. Loin banners of fallen titans hung from the ceiling. I know exactly what a loin banner is, However, just the description of a loin banner sounds like it should be a bit scandalous. I don't know, man. I just like the choice of words. A loin banner. Inscriptions commemorating victories filled embossed panels, while battle scenes etched in copper covered the floor and sections of the walls. The machinery of the hololithic projectors was hidden behind all this art, ordinarily out of sight, but the priests had opened up various bits of the decoration to get at the workings. Large circuit racks protruded from odd places all over the room. Esha Ani Mohana found the untidiness of the revealed guts added to, rather than detracted from the hall. It put her in mind of the machine god at work behind the glorious facings of the Machina Cosma. All the universe was a mechanism. Any beauty it had was a mask. With the access panels open, she felt she was seeing the mechanical truth of reality revealed. A huge set of metal gates embossed with likeness of the Legio's first Titans led out from the briefing hall. On the other side was the business end of the Strategium deck, where Tacticaria, choirs of servitors, cogitators, and all the paraphernalia needed to the Legio's management were situated. Currently this was powered down, and dark but for ready lights. The Legio Strategia were effectively separate from the vessels they were located on. Each was heavily armored and could theoretically survive the destruction of the ship itself. There were several throughout the fleet. Multiple redundancy ensured a Legio survival, so the old tenant maintained. Final authority rested with the Great Mother, who commanded her forces from her Titan in the field. But a Titan Legio without remote tactical support would find itself broken into its component parts, isolated and destroyed, while no Principe could hope to govern the vast web of supply needed to keep the great machines fighting. As quotidian as the rooms with their muttering tacticians were, compared to the majesty of engines striding the battlefield, Esha saw these chambers as the beating heart of her order. Some infospheric impulse passed between the priests. In eerie synchronicity, they finished what they were doing, closed up the access panels, and departed, leaving only 3 of their number to oversee the hololithic arrays. Dutifully, the members of the trio sang their psalms of activation and commenced their sacred task. The day mechanics ignored them. As ministers to the god machines themselves, they were far exalted over their lesser brethren. Lenses conjured figures from nothing, which coalesced hazy at first in the dark half of the hall. To begin with, they were true phantom, with eyes that were hollow spaces beneath the peaks of their caps. Their limbs were curves of mist. Loop projectors thrummed into the wall, and figures gained definition, drifted in and out of focus, and then leapt into glowing verisimilitude. Suddenly, the rest of the Legio was in attendance. So advanced was the technology available to the Legio that each person it projected seemed to be really there. There was no artifacting to their projections, no trace lines from the beams of light drawing in their presence, or interference jagging on their outlines. Only a faint glow about them, evidence solely because of the darkness of the hall, marked them out as projection ghosts. 3rd, 12th, 15th, and 18th Maniple joined the rest of the full-strength Maniples, along with ad hoc groupings made from undermanned units and the clade leaders of the Legio Scitoriae and Secutoriae contingents. Now all the strength of the Imperial Hunters was present, except their leader and her Myrmidons of First Maniple. A bass note resounded through the hall. The assembled Titan crews knelt. Priests of all ranks emitted data alerts in praise of the Omnissiah. Above the doors, the head of Luxor in Victoria coalesced into view. The Principe's Myrmidons shimmered in beneath it, their feet hovering a meter over the floor. Mohana Mankadavai's maniple consisted of hard-faced women, veterans of 100 battles. Many were the granddaughters of the companions. Those other women, who along with Mohana Mankadavai had formed the initial crew intake. The note blew again, announcing the telepresence of the Great Mother of the Imperial Hunters. I have a little sip of Wawa. My sisters of the hunt, she said. The projected head of Luxor and Victoria remained unmoving, but the Great Mother's voice was passionately modulated, still human after all of her years' confinement. From Terra, the Lord Commander of the Imperium sends out his decree. We are to defend the shipyards of Theta Garmin from total conquest. A large-scale hololithic view of the gas giant Theta Garmin 5 flickered into being. Banded clouds of azure and green striped its full belly, eddies at their boundaries hinting at the supersonic storms tearing around its circumference. There was little notable about the planet. Much were common throughout the galaxy, and like every other of its kind, it was uninhabitable. But tens of thousands of kilometers of shipyards, habitation rings, and hydrogen refineries surrounding it made it valuable. Unlike the ring of iron around Mars, the facilities did not encircle the planet completely, but together they caged its waste and suckled from it. Theta Garmin 5 was infested by humanity. The battle for this world has been ongoing for the last 3 years, the Great Mother told them. Rival factions within the facilities have been making war on one another, with varying amounts of outside help, for little gain. Until recently, this situation was common across the cluster, but the strategic outlook is changing. There is disunity among Imperial Command. The War Master is attacking numerous worlds simultaneously in an effort to tip the individual conflicts here in his favor. He has launched a major assault on this world. We are but one of dozens of Legios called. I do not wish you to focus on the size and majesty of Lord Dawn's great muster, or to dwell on the importance of the actions being undertaken on all of the cluster's worlds. You must focus upon your task, your role, and accomplish whatever mission is given you, no matter how arduous it may seem. Why is she telling us this? Saranti Daha hissed at Abhani Lus Mohana. This is always the way. This is the way. Hey, Christy, welcome. The machine goddess sent difficulties ahead to test us, said Toza Mindev. The banalities of briefing are a cant to themselves, to program the mind with calm before battle. Esha Ani Mohana risked a glance back to glare at her underlings. Quiet. The Great Mother speaks. The Principe of Second Maniple fell silent. The situation around the Garmin cluster is problematic, the Great Mother continued. Since our arrival, we have been attempting to attach ourselves to overall theater command. We have been so far unsuccessful. We can find no legitimate central authority. There are hierarchies, but none worthy of fealty. So far, we have identified 8 different organizations claiming operational seniority. Others of the crowd of Principe murmured. Esha kept her eyes forward. There had been a time when she would have whispered during her mother's briefing, but she had changed since the birth of her own daughter, more so since the start of the war. This occasion demanded respect. Elements from all over the Imperium are flooding into Beta Garmin. If one command hierarchy is established, then we shall have the difficulty of renegotiating when another challenges it. There are no loyal Primarchs in the entire subsector. Mohana Mankadavai said, "Without them, my prognosis is that the situation will not stabilize. We lack the unity Horus's leadership grants his armies. We do not have time to dicker over rights and roles. It is therefore my will that the Legio Solaria and its support group fight alone until such time as a commander we might respect be appointed by the Emperor of mankind." Maybe one already had been, thought Esha. It would be impossible to tell. The news sat ill with the officers. They had expected a Primarch. No one else could make this war a success. "All is not lost," said Mohana Mankadavai. Her raised voice silenced her Legio. "Although we do not have an indication from Lord Dorn's summons who we should follow, we do have the luxury of orders from the throne world itself. It is my hope that we are not alone in this, and that the Lord Commander exerts his will from distant Tara. It is a poor second best, and we shall see if it is effective. But for now we at least have a target. We have our orders. We shall not stint effort to fulfill them until asked to do otherwise." The tactical hololith zoomed into a constellation of orbital docks clustered about one of Theta Garmin's moons. Scores of stepped cavities, like inverted ziggurats, were gouged deep into the rock. Between these macro mines, hundreds of lesser shafts stared out blackly upon the universe. The scars of leveled mountain ranges shone with a painful reflected light. No longer a sphere, the moon was faceted as a lump of coal. The activities of mankind had eaten into it like a cancer, hollowing it out to such a degree it could not have been far from collapse. Its circumference was marked on the Tacticarium as 5,000 kilometers, a small world easily confined by mankind's artifice. Wide artificial rings where Manufactoria clustered like parasites imprisoned it wholly. The moon still turned, pulling the rings with it. They were medical supports to counter the moon's infirmity, the cure and the cause of the disease. A number of points of interest were highlighted around the moon, tagged and spectrum-coded with great levels and markers of tactical importance. All the complex variables of war boiled down to a handful of colorful runes. Hi, Knight. Welcome. Let me have some water. "This is Theta Garmin 5-1, the Great Mother said. "It is commonly referred to as Iridium by the inhabitants of this system, or the metalloid mind there. Somewhat unimaginative, but that is what we shall call it, for the sake of convenience." The view zoomed out. Several nearby orbitals were shaded red. "These facilities are held by the enemy and directly threaten the moon. The War Master has committed large numbers of God engines to this system, and to this world in particular. The lack of bombardment by void ship suggests he wishes to keep the shipyards intact. This factor is in our favor. War decrees this will be an engine battle. Conflict continues within the interior of the facilities as it has for months. The traitors wish to end this siege, and it is on the surface, engine to engine, that the struggle for Theta Garmin 5 will be decided." Welcome, Kaylin. Happy to have you. Thank you for the lurk and twerk while you do art. Always happy to have you here. Esha studied the Tacticarium display. Horus's forces had most of the orbitals in their hands. There was no way a single understrength Legio could turn the tide of battle there and retake all of Theta Garmin 5's orbitals, let alone the system. Her eyes flickered over the situation. They were going to be tasked with a stand and hold mission. Take the moon, await reinforcement. Mohana Mankatavai continued her assessment a second later. We cannot win this on our own. Our role is to take and defend Iridium against the War Master's Titans. The facilities include Alpha-grade processing plants, ship component assembly lines, and crew training collegia. But its true worth is in this infosphere node here. A pull-out pic of the construct in question blinked into the air. This is one of the dozen similar cogitation nexus relay stations situated around Theta Garmin 5. The relay showed brighter than its surroundings in the hololith. This one, however, is different. Without this one in particular, the coordinating machine spirits within this entire quadrant of Theta Garmin 5's orbit cannot communicate with each other. If this nexus is destroyed, the shipyards will suffer a drop in productivity of 34% until such time as it can be replaced. This is our hostage against the traitors' attacks. We are to secure this moon. Once it is entirely in our hands, we are to evacuate all high-ranking Adeptus Mechanicus personnel from other facilities to its sanctuary. We hold it until further forces join us. This area will be cleared by the fleet. The red-shaded graphical representations of the orbitals... The red-shaded graphical representations of the orbitals disappeared. We will cede the majority of the territory to the enemy, then strike back in force. Iridium will be the bridgehead by which Theta Garmin 5 shall be reclaimed. The strategy was sound. There were not enough of the Legio Solaria to take so large an area, but more than enough to hold the moon. Enemy assets include 2 demi-legios, the Great Mother continued. Legio Fiorians is present in large numbers, estimated 96 god engines. More murmured noise from the crowd. Our own strength is 82 engines operational. Fiorians' allies increase the odds against us. 24 engines of war support them. A queasy feeling wormed its way through Esha's guts. She knew before her mother could say it who the second Legio was. Rejoice, my kin! We have the opportunity to remove a stain on our honor, the Great Mother said. Imperial Hunters, it gives me such bitter pleasure to inform you that the Legio Volpa fights at Theta Garmin 5. Murmurs were replaced by roars of outrage. Second Maniple chattered. But for Esha, sound receded. Her ears rang, deadening the shouts of the rest. A chant was starting up around the room, issuing from mouths of steel, flesh, and light. Unto the hunt! Unto the hunt! Unto the hunt! Terrant Hartek! Terrant Hartek, Esha said, her mouth dry. The Death Stalkers! The damned Death Stalkers! Abhani Luce was saying. There was a depth of hatred there that disquieted Esha. Jahani gave Esha a sideways look. This war has not a few gifts for us after all, she said. I trust it will not prove difficult for you. She laughed loudly, a hideous, mirthless eruption of sound. It was a rare occurrence for her. Jahani and her blood sisters were serious creatures. The machine spirits delivered us the chance for vengeance, Mindev whispered. Rejoice, sisters! Remember, if he is present, hissed Jahani Jahan in Esha's ear, grabbing her shoulder. Legio first! Jahani let her go, leaving Esha staring straight ahead, alone in the vengeful crowd, thinking of the man she may have to face again. Chapter 5. The Walls of the Tantamon. Whew! How's everyone doing so far? This is getting spicy. I love seeing our ladies get real hyped up. Do you think that Esha the Younger's husband was a member of the Legio Vulpus? That would be a spicy twist. Nothing says a true mecha battle like mecha romance battling it out. Second to take some more water. To the hunt! To the hunt! Alright. Glad everyone is having fun. By the time Theta Garmin 5 had grown from a glint in the heavens to a pregnant curve of green, weapons fire was already incoming to Battle Group Solaria. The fleet spread out so that the larger ships were screened by a host of smaller craft. Las-beam strikes raised a colorful bow wave of void shield displacement flare from the Armada. Several hours later, the first serious attack came as a storm of mass projectiles. Solid munitions peppered the fleet in an attempt to collapse their shield for the torpedoes coming behind. Oh no, I have hiccups. The battle group opened fire as soon as the machine spirits of the torpedoes awoke and made solid target locks. Short-range particle beams and laser cannon fire crossed the void, shooting down missiles before they could deliver their payloads. Controlled plasma explosions took out the densest clouds of unguided projectiles. It was tit-for-tat fire. The defenses of Theta Garmin were unlikely to bring down any vessel at such an extreme range, while Battle Group Solaria did not open fire with its big guns to avoid damaging the prize. The enemy Legio's fleets hung back on the far side of the gas giant. Their warships, like Solaria's, were tasked with defending their Titan conveyors. Constant Auspex scans assured them there were few other vessels in the subsystem. There were many vessels throughout Theta Garmin, but they had no coherency. Without fleet support, Mohana Mankadavai and her shipmasters assumed the enemy would not trust their transport ships to the sole protection of the Theta Garmin defense network. Many Imperial forces had come this way recently, and though Theta Garmin 5 virtually belonged to the Legio Furians and Volpa, the rest of the system was hotly contested. By hasty agreement, Allied fleet elements dueled with the traitor flotillas guarding Theta Garmin's other worlds, tying them up while Legio Solaria approached the great shipyards. In Void War, timing was all. The battlesphere was system-wide and riven with uncertainty. Unlooked-for reinforcements could appear for either faction from any quarter. The battle was a patchy mess of skirmishes, and was likely to stay that way, with no commander daring to leave his holdings open in case they were attacked. Threat and bluff were the orders of the day, and that allowed Legio Solaria's approach. Disunity on the side of the Imperium was expected. The Great Mother was surprised to see the traitors equally disorganized. Even so, Battle Group Solaria was not allowed to approach unchallenged. The call to arm klaxons blared in the Tantaman's halls of communion. In each one, a dozen thrown mechanicum awaited under red spotlights, shrouded with sterilizing gases. They clung to polished steel rails, ready to release their holding clamps and drop into the warsuits at rest in the galleries transcendent. The most heavily armored part of the Tantaman's permanent structure, and the place where the tied knights of the Legio were kept. Baravti Hanto was prepared to fight. His mustaches and the small triangle of his black beard were freshly waxed. His hair was slicked back and parted well clear of his skull interface points. His uniform, though hidden beneath his battle garb, was immaculately pressed. Hanto's squire, Dashiel, fussed around the last seals of the combat suit, tightening the straps on the armor plates. Click buckles fastened greaves around the top of armored boots, and vibrances around reinforced gloves. The boy worked as fast as he could, which was not fast enough. Hanto waited impatiently as Dashiel attached the breastplate to the backplate, then finally moved on to Hanto's pauldrons. Upon these shoulder plates his colors were displayed. The left bore the markings of the Legio Salaria, a raptor's footprint, in a black-winged circle, upon a field of bone enclosed in dark red. The right carried a broken lance clasped in the talons of a blue eagle on white, which was the badge of House Procon Vi. A painted barodial crown hovering over the eagle proclaimed Hanto's rank, while on a tilting plate hanging from his chest gleamed his personal badge of azure and argent lozenges with a male fist superimposed. Dashiel fumbled the last snap hatch. Hanto's patience finally broke. "Get off, boy!" Hanto snapped, shoving the squire aside. His attendant was the son of a distant cousin, and too young even for an armiger warsuit. As the highest ranking of all the house's attendants, he was entitled to squire for Hanto. Unfortunately for him, Hanto thought he was also the clumsiest. "Learn respect! Learn diligence! You are showing neither!" Hanto held his gloved finger up for emphasis close to the youth's face. The squire flinched from it. I'm sorry, my Lord Baron," he stammered. "Don't be sorry, be bitter," Hanto said, forcing the snap hatch closed with one hand. "The others are ready." He swept his arm down the line of men waiting for battle, already suited and helmeted. "Get me my helm!" The youth turned to the wall where Hanto's war gear was stowed. The glass-fronted locker for his combat suit and body armor was empty. The helm still rested in a pool of light at a separate box over the top. As the youth reached for it, the pane shot up into the wall. He retrieved the helmet and handed it to his master. "My lord," he said with a bow. "About time," Hanto said as he rammed the helmet onto his head. Padding encased his skull. Amber plastic interposed itself between his eyes and the world. Seals took with a sudden sucking. Tiny claws clamped themselves around his skull's socket. A peep sounded. His vox beads activated, and the visor display fizzed into life. Though it was as yet empty of information, he moved towards the throne mechanicum waiting for him in the shaft. But a lack of weight at his hip had him stop. "Pistol! Pistol! Where's my bloody pistol?" He roared. "Here, my lord!" The boy fumbled Hanto's gun belt around his waist. Hanto snatched the buckle from his hand and did it up himself while striding to his throne. He turned about and sat. With their leader at his place, the other knights took their own seats. Hanto was sure they'd be sniggering behind their featureless helms. He was going to have to do something about the boy. "Engage systems! We march for the Legio!" Hanto said, his voice amplified by his helmet. "Host Procon Vi! Legio Salaria!" his warrior shouted. "Onto the fire! Onto the hunt! Legio first!" "Legio first! House second! Engage!" the Baron commanded. His finger hovered over the release button like a threat. Retainers and servitors responded to the criticism, manifest in the gesture, and hurried forward to connect cables into the interface points of Hanto's suit. Twist locks clicked into place on the socket hardpoints. Delicate feather touches of questing wires slid into the ports at the back of his neck, bringing a momentary tingling discomfort at his teeth. This quickly receded to be replaced by a sense of intense anticipation, and he could not suppress a grin. His visor display burst into colorful life. The sense of his own body faded. Far below, he could hear his warsuit calling to him. The klaxon blared, rousing his excitement. First of all, I have to say, I already love this night crew because they're so incredibly, fantasy, douchebag knights, and I totally love that. Secondly, this is why I fucking love mecha shit. The whole, talking about the connecting of interface ports into the body and everything. It's just so peak. It's so peak in every form of media. Sacristans scuttled between displays, blurting machine noise at each other. Their leader was bent double, his spine unnaturally pronounced, and head elevated on a metal neck with far too many vertebrae. All connections operating at peak efficiency! Praise the Messiah! Drop! Said the Baron. His fingers stabbed down, brakes let go of his throne's restraints, and he went into freefall. Luves opened in the pipe, venting gas from the tube and removing air drag, and he dropped faster. God, I love dropship stuff. It's just so cool. He tested his infospheric link. For a fraction of a second, he looked upon the engines of Legio Solaria's second and fourth manifolds through the dropship's Auspex eyes. 4 Warhound Scout Titans, 2 Reavers. Their hulls were dappled green and white, trim bronze. Command heads and weapon cowls red. Their banners red and ivory. The tiny figures of machine adepts preparing them for battle gave them scale. The smallest of them much bigger than his own knight. Honto felt like a king among men when he strode the field with human troopers, but here were gods to whom he was but a servant. A sharp pang of envy stabbed at his heart. If only he were permitted to pilot such a machine. You gotta love the irony of how the noble houses of Procon were all male-focused for their knights, and now that females are the only ones chosen to be for Legio Solaria pilots, this knight pilot is like, man, I wish I was a girl so I could become a Titan pilot. And it's like, if there needs to be a tech priest of the Mechanicus Biologist to tell him, have you considered estradiol, my lord? If you're wondering where my Mechanicus voice comes from, it specifically comes from Dawn of War. The Dawn of War tech priest used by the Imperial Guard talked like that, and that is how all tech priests talk, as far as I'm concerned. And if anybody's wondering what a sacristan is basically a tech priest, but specifically for Imperial Knights. So, would you transition for the privilege of the right to command a Warlord Titan? Some would say it's blasphemous to not. Exactly. How dare you deny the god machine by your pesky testosterone? The sight was snatched away and the thought with it. The images conjured in his head replaced by rapidly cycling views of the ship's exterior. Satisfied with his link to the wider infosphere, he shut down the connection and returned his attention to his surroundings. The throne continued to fall. The ship shook hard enough to throw him about in his throne. The bombardment was intensifying. Spinning red lights lined the last 100 meters of the drop chute. Grav cushioning caught the throne, and it abruptly decelerated. Honto clenched his jaw in preparation for the jarred connection with his knight. The edges of the knight's carapace access ports sped past. The throne mechanicum slammed home. The hatch dropped hard. Atmosphere hissed into his cockpit, pressurizing the interior. Lock bolts whined into place. Clamps slammed shut noisily around the throne's base, and lights and screens came on all around him. He rested his hands upon emergency manual controls, but he never needed these. The true source of control in Imperial machines of that size was a mind impulse unit. By the miracles of ancient technology, Honto's consciousness ran out through cables, and with great anticipation of the battle to come, he linked with his knight, Falcon Punch. The mind of his warsuit nuzzled into his, fitting it like glove to hand, and man and machine became one. His eyes looked upon a different world. He was a metal giant with guns for fists. The heat of a plasma reactor replaced the beat of his heart. Honto let out a belligerent chuckle. "Forward!" he said, shouting it into his Vox pickup. "Forward for House Procon Vi! Unto the fire! Unto the hunt! Legio first! The knights were shouting their battle cries through their machines. No one could hear outside of the suits, for the whole dropship was depressurized, ready for vacuum operations, but it mattered not at all. House Vi's Voxnet roared with aggression. Forward! He bellowed. Transit clamps fell away from the knights' feet, waist, and shoulders. Swivel doors opened at the rear of the sanctuary pod. The throne chute allowed the knights to join with their warsuits quickly once the dropships were on the ground, and so range out ahead of their Titan masters. The forward doors of the knight pods opened into the dropship itself, but this time, Honto was heading up. His hands twitched with phantom nerve impulses as he urged his machines backwards through the rear doors. Pivoting gracefully, he moved towards a simple square lifter platform. All along the edge of the Gallery Transcendent, numbered cylinders hatched with hazard stripes swiveled open, and the Knights of House Broken Vi strode out, ever critical, Honto thought. The effect would have been better had they emerged in perfect unison, but even with the cylinders opening out of sequence, and the Knights taking to their lifters in their own time, it was an impressive sight. In every dropship docking arm, the same thing would be happening. Honto checked in with the lance leaders of the other knightly banners to ensure all was going to plan. He wished he were already outside on the ramparts, where he could see the 100 knights of Procon Vi rise up and take to their defensive positions. But it was a spectacle for the enemy to enjoy. He determined to make their entrance as impressive as possible. The very least they could do was arrive more or less together. House Broken Vi, rise! He commanded. 5 score chimes rang in his helm in acknowledgement. His knight's knees bent with sudden grav-impelled acceleration as the lifters rose, bearing the knights of House Broken Vi to the battlements of Legio Solaria's floating fortress. The lifter coasted to a gentle stop. Gravity shifted treacherously. A weightless knight was easily toppled. Mass, not weight, was the deciding factor in any damage it would take should it fall. To the walls! Honto commanded. Red lights flashed around the lifter portals, and the doors cracked open on starkly lit battlements. Void shield discharge and explosions flickered conflicting patterns of light into the shaft. Honto stepped out into the battlements of the Tantamon. The first step was light and unsteady, but as Falcon's foot passed the threshold, he felt his center of gravity shift over the grav-plated wall walk, and the claw toes clanged onto the deck with reassuring solidity. The Knights of House Procon Vi emerged and took up their positions along the battlement. Crenellations as tall as 10 men lined the ramparts on both sides, protecting the wall walk wide enough for a pair of knights to pass each other. Gates opened in the base of the towers that broke up the length of the parapet to the knights through to their stations. Through the temporary tunnel, Honto saw other lances moving to the firing platform, set into embrasures in the battlement. On the other arm of the Tantamon H, and on the bottom of the ship, a similar muster was underway. Scores of his house manned the walls, and took up his own position. In a fight like this, his warriors needed little ordering. Each was a master of warfare in his own right. Even away from open battle and the complexities of formation change, redeployment and guarding attacks that were a knight's banner's forte, they waited patiently, without fear on the top and bottom of the ship. Honto needed not say anything. He spoke nevertheless, his voice carrying to all the 100 aboard the Tantamon, and across the void to the 70 upon Artemisia. Knights of House Broken Vi, stand firm! By now his mind was enmeshed with that of Falcon. He saw out of its eyes the restlessness that possessed him between engagements was gone. He experienced a sort of savage contentment within the mind-impulse link. He was a hound, tensed, alert, ready to be released. For the moment there was little for his knights to do. The void shields of the Tantamon were multiply layered. they would hold against a bombardment of this magnitude for hours. As yet no strike craft came against the walls. Falcon's head turned under its armored cowl as Honto's unspoken command. Throughout its false eyes, Honto watched the moon of Iridium and its attendant orbitals rush towards him through the void. Theta Garmin 5 brooded behind half its striped bulk softly shadowed, the other glaring in the light of the sun. In the airless void there was no sound from outside, save that conveyed by direct vibration in the ship's fabric. So his hearing was full of the ticks, bleeps, whirs, and whines of the systems working within his warsuit. As a sleeper on a silent night becomes entranced by the strange, organic noises emanating from his body, so Honto drifted into the mechanical life of his fighting machine. Bereft of outside stimulation, his organic senses intruded over his night's input, and he led a doubled existence, simultaneously a man and an iron giant. Some found the sensation led to dislocation, but it fascinated him. He explored it. An urgent beeping broke his reverie. A gridded vector map superimposed itself over his field of vision. Pulsing red dots raced towards the Tantamon. "Assault craft! Incoming! All vectors prepare to repel borders!" he commanded. As he gave the order, his machine vision caught sight of the attackers, as glints in the storm of war, steadier lights against explosions, and writhing void shield activity. The bombardment suddenly dropped off on most of the shield, but intensified on the forward left. Shells burst, blinding spheres of atomic fire flattened themselves on the Aegis, linking up, subsuming shield aurora into their violent blaze. The hits became a rolling wall of fire. More chimes sounded in Honto's mind. The void screen was coming down, individual shields dropping one after another. The last shield burst with a display of purple lightning, so intense it outshone the destructive forces that brought it down. A last couple of hits brought a few more discharges, then the bombardment ceased, and the approaching ships became easier to see. A swarm of darts arrowed for the gap in the shields. Somewhere in the depths of the hull, burned-out generator coils would be in the process of being swapped out by giant machines and cohorts of specially modified crewmen. A Titan Legio could die in the void without firing a shot. Ship shields had to be raised fast when they were brought down. Honto reactivated his link with the Tantamons, teaming Cogitator network. Status screens for the vessel popped into life across his vision. He dismissed them all but for the shield matrix data screed. A counter ran down rapidly towards zero. The void would not be raised in time to stop all the ships coming into assault. Good, he thought. He welcomed the foe. His weapons stirred. Time for some water. Okay. Okay, his weapons stirred. "Stand by, my knights!" Honto called. His night suit gave a challenge only it and Honto could hear in the silent dark. Impulses raced to war horns that could not sing without air, but all the knights heard the call within their second machine-made world. "They are coming!" The glints grew, the first past the limits of the Aegis fields rapidly. In an eye blink, half were through, jinking madly to avoid the Tantamon's point defense fire. Several exploded, poured out by last shot. Rangefinders trilled excitedly in Honto's helm. His knight shifted in anticipation. The trill became a clear note. The enemy were close enough that his warriors might hit them. "Housebroken Vi! Open fire!" He himself was firing before he finished the order. The rapid-fire battle cannon on his right arm pumped out 3-shot salvos, while rockets streaked out from his carapace-mounted array. His thermal cannon was not yet within focal range. Its machine spirits clamored like children denied a treat in their desire to shoot. In the vacuum, his shells were silver streaks. He tracked an assault ship across the void, hammering it with explosions. A missile hit from his storm spear pod broke the ship's back, and it came apart into fragments, spilling bodies and brief flames into the void. He shouted with triumph. All along the wall, the knights were swinging their huge, ponderous torsos, adding their fire to that of the ship. The counter in Honto's head reached 0, and the Aegis flickered back into life. The stragglers of the attack swarm slammed into its surface, exploding on the newly raised shield screens. Half their mass shunted in the warp, in eruptions of blue and violet light. By then, the foremost assault shuttles had made it to the ship. They were strange-looking craft. Several limpeted onto the hull, spread arms clamping them into place. Fusion fires flashed through gaps as they chewed their way into the hull of the Tantamon and its dropships. Ball-mounted las cannons hidden in the parapet's machicolations. That's a made-up word. Machicolations came into view, sweeping the walls of the spacefaring fortress free with flicker blasts of coherent light. Those unlucky enough to land upon the tops of the dropships were easily picked off, but they were poor landings and the majority were headed for the castle wall itself. The whole venture was practically suicide, but though desperate, a successful attack offered a great prize, the capture of a demi-legio of god machines. If the enemy took the wall, others could land upon the dropships unopposed, while the Knights' lifters offered a way into the Tantamon itself. An assault shuttle streaked past Honto, out of control, engines firing wildly. It crash-landed to bounce along the wall walk. Arms extended from its side and drove mechanical claws like picks into the hull. They were torn off by the score, but the craft slowed until finally it slammed to a halt. On its remaining limbs, the ship rose up and scuttled forward, revealing itself as an Oniskadari drop tank. Panels slid aside to exude plasma calivars, which immediately opened fire. The boarding ramp at the prow dropped, and outpoured 24 heavily armed cyborgs of false mechanicum Scatarii. Honto fired his thermal cannon down the throat of the passenger bay before the ramp could rise, obliterating the craft in a ball of blue fire. But it was only the first. Dozens more filled the void and crashed down onto the wall walk. The fight was as brutal as any feudal escalade. The knights were tall and powerful, and their weapons smashed apart the drop tanks as soon as they landed. But the boarders were elite vanguard troopers in self-sustaining armors, numerous and wielding weapons of the deadliest kind. They were no lowly tech thralls, but a specialist void clade of the highest specification. One of the knights near Honto went down to a well-aimed fusillade of plasma fire. Searing beams overloaded its ion shields and sliced into the vulnerable joints at the knees and elbows. One weapon fell limp, the other bounded off the parapet wall and floated away, free of the artificial gravity of the wall. The knight fell backwards, gas and flame vented from the cabin. The pilot's scream rose in an agonized pitch before abruptly falling silent. The wall shook as the back of the knight blew out, demolishing part of the parapet, and an expanding cloud of fire flung the knight's slayers about like leaves in the wind. Honto leaned into it, ion shield swiveled front. When the blast cleared, several enemy drifted dead, but the majority recovered, rerouted their systems around their damaged bionics, and pulsed their built-in void jets to return to the ship. Honto abandoned his position, turning his attention from the void to the wall walk. The majority of the enemy had landed and were swarming over his warriors. Their assault shuttles turned crawl tanks, fired lances of plasma from all angles. Honto switched his own ion shields about rapidly to take the worst of the fire. But the enemy were everywhere and attacking everything, and the ion shield's directional placement was a continuous set of compromises. A mechanicum war was not fought on the physical plane alone. Some of the assault ships carried machinery squirming with malevolent code instead of troops. Upon landing, they extended limbs and crawled over the craft like ticks, antennae probing the hull in search of vulnerable data conduits. Where they found their targets, mandibles splayed, and adamantium-tipped proboscises speared into metal, injecting optic pipes with a deadly cargo of ones and zeros. Within the Tantamon's infosphere, loyal hunter-killer spirits grappled with these invaders, while dedicated data mages of the cyber thaumaturgia formulated new avenues of defense against semi-demonic scrap codes. As the defenders adapted, the invaders fought back. Evolutions that would take millennia in an organic system took place in seconds. Other craft carried microscopic machines that ate through metal and attacked systems more directly, by severing cables and short-circuiting vital conduits. Again, the Tantamon had an answer. Beetle-bodied scavengers emerged from ducts and gathered up the Techmites with high-powered magnets and gravity hooks, breaking them down into their component parts for later use. This was war of the most total kind, from machine spirits through microscopic machine life to modified humans, all the way up to war engines and many times taller than a man, all fought over the body of the ship. I do kind of appreciate this description of this very, like, insectile, like, combat going on. Like, the fact that these ships are described like beetles and, like, flies and stuff, and there's, like, mites and, like, fucking all this kind of shit. I think it's cool imagery of this, what is incredibly high-tech and sophisticated technology being described in the most, like, basic animal way. I think is kind of fun. Give me 1 second to drink some water. Okay. In its own way, the Mechanicum fighting itself was more terrible than the burning of planets by the Legiones Astartes. A world's rocks do not make war. The ship was a world, and the entirety of it was at war. Nothing was spared. Oh, nothing was spared violence. All was drafted into the fight. Honto bowled his way through the press of the enemy, crushing borders beneath his feet. Globules of blood and oil drifted into space. A breaching team were attacking one of the lifter gates with las cutters. As he passed, Honto swiveled his warsuit's torso and cut them down with a measured burst of heavy stubber fire. A heavy stubber is basically like a 50 cal machine gun. The Tantamon shuddered under the unkindness of battle and sabotage. Another wave of attackers was coming in, preceded like the first by a heavy shield-stripping bombardment. Beyond the shields, the rest of the fleet was fighting. Black lightning scored the surface of space as the Metallo Mutandus targeted the enemy's weapons emplacements upon the moon. Flights of destroyers and servitors piloted combat craft blurred overhead, engaging false Mechanicum fighters, escorting the second wave of boarders. All of Tantamon's guns were firing. Behind Honto's position, the macro cannons slung tank-sized shells towards the orbitals and their monitor ships. Las fire interlaced in a deadly web across the crowded sky. By now, the battlement was a disorienting seethe of discharging weapons, swinging giants' limbs and explosions, made all the more confusing by the Tantamon's guns. The bombardment and the Aegis response to it. Actinic light burst from multiple vectors, whiting out Falcon's autosenses and throwing everything into hard relief. In places, the gravity plating was breaking down. Honto had to watch his step. He couldn't use his thermocannon on the wall walk, and even the battle cannon was a risk to the ship's hull. But he had no close combat weapons. Like others who swept away dozens of foes with every strike of their Reaper chainswords, or grabbed up scuttle tanks and crushed them in their gargantuan fists. The fortification could take a little friendly fire, he told himself, as he let off 2 shots into a knot of Scutarii. Perfect spherical explosions blasted them to nothing. Shrapnel passed around Honto's ion shield, pattering off his armor like rain. Once more, Tantamon's void banks winked out, and the second wave of enemy assault craft speared through the hole in the Aegis, chased by flights of friendly interdiction craft. Though the servitor ships and Tantamon's anti-fighter weapons took their toll, more of the second wave made it through now that the knights were occupied with the fight on the wall. Honto had no time to spare for the newcomers. He continued his struggle to clear the battlements. By the time he could pause and take stock, the second wave had come down, and they were attempting a different manner of entry. Adjusting my camera. All over the roofs of the dropships, traitor assault shuttles were clamping themselves to metal. Gunfire blazed from the wall cannons, and the ships. A few of the craft disgorged their troops to form defensive perimeters around the craft and take down the wall defenses. These newcomers were of a different order again. Holoxii, he voxed. Holoxii and automata on the dropships. Heavy assets are assaulting the dropships. He grunted as he fired his thermocannon, immolating a score of the enemy. They're going for the Titans! Look at him. Look at that Crusader pattern Titan. That must be Falcon. Chapter 6. Combat Drop. Hope everybody's enjoying it so far, as we have made it through to another chapter. We are officially 20% through the book. Pretty cool. Okay. The Titans had been brought up to combat-ready status well before the attack, the process beginning as soon as they arrived in system. People looked to the size, might, and weaponry of the god machines as signifiers of their power, but a Titan's greatest weapon was the machine mind housed within, and the first part of the Legio process of war was to awaken them. The longer the period of activation, the better. A long period enabled the rituals to be undertaken correctly, with the approved amounts of sacred oils, incense, and other libations needed to ensure good function. The crews were barred from the ceremonies, while the priests of the cult Tigris undertook their duties. Esha Ani Mohana fretted outside the dropship. Always she went to the loading bay portal set into the vast drop gates of the ships. It was the closest she could get during the ceremony. She was never alone. Durana Fall usually arrived before she did. Toza Mindev was another regular. Some of the Moderati were usually present. The rest showed up as they wished. The thought of the machines coming to consciousness without being connected to them filled the crews with a sense of medical violation, as if it were their bodies that were being poked and prodded during the priest's strange rituals, because of the same feelings some preferred to stay away. The divide between human operator and metal giant was small, and grew smaller with every joining. The sense of disconnection out of battle was profoundly uncomfortable for some, and that also grew with every separation. The Imperial hunters did not favor immersion tanks for their Principe unless absolutely necessary. Their way of coping with machine disassociation was to immerse themselves in the physical whenever out of the manifold. While on planet, they hunted according to the habits of their ancestors. Aboard ship, they sparred or undertook military training. They held modest recreations of Procon's lordly feasts. They remembered the ways of their kind. Distraction kept them sane between battles. None of it was enough when the machines began to wake. The moment the first rites of activation were performed, Esha Ani Mohana felt Domina ex Venari calling to her. Shooting pains afflicted her extremities. Her palms were constantly damp. She could not sit well. A mix of maternal yearning and narcotic withdrawal ran electric pains through her nervous system. Each of the human components of the god machines had to deal with these feelings in their own way. They supported one another and that helped, but the help only went so far. Everyone suffered according to their own habits. After awakening, the machines were tested for mental soundness by the Vox Omni Machina. The priests kept their secrets close, but Esha knew the Vox Omni Machina linked with his charges directly, and that added an outraged sense of jealousy to the turbulence in her soul. The Principe were allowed in to see their machines during the second phase, but not to interface. It was dangerous to rouse the spirits of the war gods without good reason. They were swords that could not be sheathed until bloodshed. During this period of maintenance, Esha stalked the hangar deck, nervous energy forcing her to take step after step until she exhausted herself. The Titans' bodies were infested with probes. Neokora crawled all over their innards. Prometheus orchestrated 1,000 petty indignities. Servitors trudged around every part of the interior, doggedly swapping out damaged or worn components. She had become adept at not getting in the way. The day mechanics and their crews worked around her and the others, although she knew her presence was barely tolerated. It was a time of showers of sparks and whining power tools, of grumbling engines and hissing plasma torches, while hammers rang and priests chanted, and the servitor choirs sang the same hymns on endless loop. The dropship hangar at that time smelled of oil and hot metal, sweat, paint, and polish. There were support machines everywhere, crates, barrels, and spillages of sacred unguent. Plastic sheets hung over areas of maintenance. Scaffolds encased the warhound os rubrum to the waist to allow the replacement of a malfunctioning hip gyro. Half the priests were as busy chanting as the rest were with their tools and data links. She hated this time. The link with the Titan was familial. While Domina Ex Venari was helpless, it felt like her child, ill in the hospice. She was the Titan. It was her. It was her father. She its mother. There were no division in these emotions. They made a complex set of chains binding her to a machine in ways unfathomable to those outside the Collegia Titanica. After maintenance, the Titans' loadouts were changed for the coming battle according to the wishes of the Principe. Under guidance from the Principe Majoris and Legio Strategos, their reactors were spooled up from maintenance power to pre-combat draw. The crews went aboard themselves at this point to run their own tests and calibrations, and limited mind impulse linkage was permitted under the eyes of the ever-present tech priests. The joining was insufficient to blunt the crew's cravings. The engined beings were not fully raised to wakefulness, and the mind blend was deadened by intervening monitoring machinery. If anything, the fleeting contact made Esha's sense of isolation worse. Her feeling of panic increased. Only 24 hours before the final approach to Theta Garmin 5 were the final services held for the machine spirits. The Titans thoroughly blessed and their honor banners attached. The human contingent of the Legio was present, completely for the rites, moving in solemn procession from dropship to dropship aboard the Tantamon. Then to the Artemisia, and at last to the smaller conveyors and their stacked ranks of coffin ships, where the assembled officers and priests passed through fragile plastic corridors, linking the smaller dropships to the other. Other Legios possessed conveyors that combined the advantages of coffin drop pod and large hangars. The Tigrian priesthood did not favor them. After the blessings, the crews waited in arming rooms close by the boarding jetties to their Titans, and waited, and waited. Their combat uniforms were close-fitting environmental suits of void-resistant grade, topped with integrated shoulder, chest, and back armor, to which were locked large square helms. Armor glass faceplates allowed them to look out. They were claustrophobic, heavy items where the hiss-click of oxygen provision, leaps of machinery assuring continuous air supply, and the thunder of one's own breathing shut out most of the sound from outside. At any other time, Esha would have found the sense of isolation soothing. As she waited for battle, she felt trapped by her need to link with Domina Ex Venari. Each hissing burst of the air unit spiked, and pains running up and down her arms and legs. Esha forced herself to look outwards, past her suit visor in the presence of the 6 women around her, out into a far wider world, as she would when linked. By comparison to those 2 long-delayed moments of union, she was limited, but not blind. Hey, Alistair, welcome, welcome. Thank you for the 30-month resub. Who's up forcing the heresy right now? Exactly. We're we're having the Titan spaceships are under attack from heretics as the various knights and are trying to shoot down all the landing craft and stuff in space. And the Titans are prepared to drop pod onto the space station. I hope you're doing okay, Alistair. The vibrations of the ship's metal told her much. Although the pain singing in her skin, she felt the lifters propel House Procon by to their defensive positions. She felt the void shields collapse in the oversized clunks and bangs as their capacitors were swapped. The fire of point defense weapons added a delicate thrill to the punch of big guns shaking the fabric of the craft. Hard hits sent into predictable pulses of the ship's reactors into arrhythmia. The chaotic vibrational patterns of surface combat came soon after. Oh, I'm sorry you're not doing well, Alistair. Hopefully sometime looping about, listening to some Titan people will help fluff you up a bit. But I hope your day gets better. They've started without us, said Fanina Bull, one of Esha's Moderati Bellatas. She craned her neck as much as she was able to look above, though there was nothing to see but the ceiling, and the fight was on both ventral and dorsal spines of the ship. You'll get your turn, said Odani Jahan, Esha's second Bellatus. She was like her blood sister. Jahani in a lot of ways, though more... Oh, she was like her blood sister, Jahani, in lots of ways, though more inclined to tension. Whether this was because of her youth or her character was not yet clear to Esha. She was relatively new to the crew. Nefa Nen, the third weapons operator, sniggered nervously. Be quiet! The wait is bad enough and you're making it worse! The command of Yaha, Moderati Primus silenced them. The weapons Moderati studied the floor. No one would go against the Primus's words. Esha relied on her to keep the others in line. The remaining members of her crew were Mafani Ohana Oratorius, whose role as communications officer was vital to the far-ranging Imperial hunters, and Jeffinir Jahan, who fell between her siblings Jahani and Odani in years, but whose preternatural abilities in coaxing the Titan to move suited her well to her role as Esha's steersman. Neither of these two spoke. Reavers and other Legios might take a further to Moderati, but the Legio Solaria were mistresses of the hunt, and the Principe had no need of additional crew at either the navigational or sensorium positions. By their ethos, a huntress should be a master pathfinder and reader of Spore. Any Principe who required help in these areas was not worthy of the name. Esha's legs ached savagely. She forced herself not to jiggle them. Only the ready klaxon saved her from an undignified bout of fidgeting. It was not until the first shots trembled the exposed hull of the Tantamon, and the roaring of the ship's reactor rushed, cataract loud, down every access way, that the order was given for Esha Ani Mohana and her Manipul to join with the other Titans. Lumens turned from yellow to green, and urgent Tosin sang a call to arms. Move! Shouted Yaha, otter feet before all the others. Esha was next, eyes on the airlock door. She slammed her palm onto the activation plate. The door's spirit announcement of her name a barely heard string of nonsense sounds. Blood roared in her ears at last. She thought, at last! The airlock outer door admitted them all and slammed closed. Air womped out, and the inner door whisked itself away. A third door, this one the dull orange of the dropship exterior, opened a microsecond after. They passed from the Tantamon into the Manipul dropship, running along the short pier leading to the rear door between the massive heat exchangers mounted on the Titan's back. The hangar was already depressurized. A passionless machine counted down the seconds to combat drop over their Vox speeds as they ran within the Reaver. They had to duck through the low door into the machine. The engine had no airlock, and the whole machine began to repressurize with atmospheric mix as soon as they were all in, and crossing the cramped atrium to the armored head. Servitors stared sightlessly at them from their alcoves. The small door leading to the command deck slid aside. Jeffenir Jahan, Yaha Yaha, Mafani Ohana, and finally Esha Adi Mohana clambered into the tight space, long practice preventing them cracking their large helms against the interior. Fahina Bowl, Nefana Nen, and Odani Jahan waited for Esha. God, these fucking names, man. Putting them all one after another is literally brutal. Waited for Esha to pass into the head, before splitting left and right to pass through the doors, leading to the gunnery chamber set within the shoulders. Dim light filtered through the tiny window set about the Reaver's auger eyes. The head was broad, but sloped down sharply to the front, and much of its muzzle was taken up by the socket points for the massive armored cables that curled away and back from the machine's face, like extravagant mustaches. They could see very little out of the windows. A large vid-screen display gave a view outside, but they would not need that once they were linked to the manifold. They were all talking, all at once, flicking switches and punching buttons as they slid into their seats. Esha took to the cracked leather of her command throne, with the voice of her crew and her manifold yammering at her. They were all excited, eager to be off on the hunt. The term command throne was overblown. The seat was little more than a pilot's couch, and its meager cushioning was uncomfortably divided by a line of metal housing the interface spikes for the MIU. Even in a machine the size of Domina X Minari, there was barely room for the 4 women of the command team. It was hot and cramped in seconds. None of that would matter. Good afternoon, Principe! Magos Die Mechanic Omega 6. The Six's cheerful tones spoke into her vox. He was the only fully sentient aboard not wired into the manifold, and so always spoke with her this way. His station was on the reactor deck, and its rising output jagged his words with static. I have my orchestra ready to play a fine symphony to greet the rising of the sun. Greetings, Magos. You have a bizarre love of imagery for a tech priest. You'll be disappointed if it were otherwise. That is so. Bring the reactor up to 2/3 power. Prepare for combat level output. All indicators are within green parameters. I shall pray it remains so. Do. This looks like a hard fight. Hard fight means hard use of my reactor. You know so, she said. She put a genuine grin into the words. She smiled so rarely now it was pleasant to remember how. She locked her hands and feet into the control gloves and stirrups, calmed her breathing, closed her eyes, and with a sense of delicious anticipation said, Interface! The stab of the neural spikes into the socket set door skull was unbelievably painful. It was worth it every time. A nice little sippy sip. Oh, okay. Elated calm took hold of the crew. Their horizons expanded beyond the realms of flesh as their minds raced out through the MIU to mesh with piston and gun. To outsiders, the members of the Collegio Titanica were different to their tech priest masters. They did not pursue augmentation so ruthlessly as the Martian priesthood, taking bionics only to continue service after injury or to better interface with their machines. They did not deny their humanity. This, along with their uniforms and manners, made them seem more imperial than mechanicum, like naval or army officers. To other men and women, they were fellow humans, where the tech priests were frightful cyborgs. The Titan crews were approachable, although they piloted the most awesome instruments of war to tread soil in mankind's name. Not like the priests. Their obsessive need to grub up the meat of their bodies and rethread themselves with wire seemed a most terrible mythology. These outsiders were wrong. The Titan Legio were as devoted to the machine cult as the most flesh-hating Magos. They did not replace blood with oil, but this was simply because they did not need to. They were closer to their god than any other worshipper of the Omnissiah ever could be. In battle, they were its avatars, the bellicose saints and angels of the three who was one, and the pains they underwent to achieve such holy transformation, going back and forth between immortal, metal might and transient organic being, taught them the value of both states. One could be man or machine, but not both at once. They alone achieved the heavenly union of humanity's sacred form with the body of the machine god incarnate, and found a measure of equilibrium there. Suffering was the border between the MIU manifold and the living world. By crossing it, they purified their souls, so that even in their flesh form, they became the apostles of the Omnissiah himself. So the Magos Principia Militaris, the Order's Bishop Prince, said in his sermons. For herself, Esha did not believe a word of it. All she recognized from his words was the bliss of neuronic union, the pain of divorce from the mechanism, and the power the change gave her. Frustration left the crew while battle reigned in the void. Tom held sway in the hangar. Second Manifold joined with their machines at a measured pace. Hey, Zeph, welcome. Praise the Omnissiah! Our Titan crews are about to do a orbital combat drop on this shipyard, like moon or whatever, while Imperial Knights are fighting on the overall carrier ship, trying to destroy borders before they breach the hull and start killing Titan crews. I hope you're doing well, Zeph. Theoretically, the Titan should be ready for war as soon as the linkages were made, but after so long deactivated, it was not. Domina ex Venari's machine soul was sluggish with long inaction, and Esha struggled to rouse it. Come on, Domina! Esh whispered to herself. The minds of her Moderati brushed against her psyche. In return, her sense of self spread outwards through them. The mind link was not and could never be entire, but enough of themselves entered each other that sometimes it was hard to tell who pulled the trigger or who saw the target first. The operation of the Titan depended on this human network. Moderati minds supported her, a pyramid of human souls with her at the apex, helping her bear the burden of cowing the indomitable soul of so mighty a war machine. The Principe's role was hardest of them all. She could not lose herself in the Titan as the Moderati could. At one and the same time, she must maintain close links with her crew, while retaining enough of herself to order and direct them. She had, in short, to be in two places at once. Esha was very good at that. Although the link was still weak, already she experienced the doubling of identity granted by the manifold, as she saw from the Reaver's auspexes as well as her own eyes. On the one hand, she looked through the murky oculus at the hangar, a woman inside a tower peering through a small window on the other. She stared imperiously down from 25 meters high, through lenses of charged crystal, at the ant-like humans scurrying around her feet. They meant nothing. Her peers were other giants. There was a second like herself, a crouched monster, whose back and shoulder joints were covered over by a mottled white and green armored carapace, from under which projected a wide, colopteran head. Beside this were four other monsters, smaller, but still titanic, with dark red heads cast in the likeness of snarling hounds, perpetually bent double as if casting for a scent. Her back. Esha was Domina ex Venari, and it was her, a giant of legend wrought of adamantium, ceramite, plasteel, glassite, and exotic alloys. brought to life by the wonders of a captive star and the powers of the motive force. Only not entirely. Not yet. She still felt herself as a distant being within the giant's head, not limited by her mortal state any longer, but not free of it either. This overlap was uncomfortable. It was not her fault. The final component in the machine was not yet engaged. Domina ex Venari's soul would not be woken. She chided Domina gently as it turned over at the touch of its mistress's mind. A dog by the fire, only half willing to leave for the rain of the forest and the joy of the kill. The drop count was rattling down at too fast a pace, as she kept half an eye on the battle data transferred via the Legio infospheric link to the Titan manifold. The machine's cogitators were meshing with her brain, lending her their speed. She calculated faster than any data savant ever could. Her god gave her abilities beyond mere destruction. His gifts were many. Iridium was rapidly nearing. Still, Domina ex Venari sulked at her. It had waited too long since First Awakening. It was angry. Esha had no time for this. All crews, report in status. Valix Canis standing by, reported Saranti Daha. Her words had an eager, aggressive edge to them. She yearned to run and fight. Cursor Pharaoh, anticipating full readiness in 20 seconds, relayed Jahani Jahan. Prokul Videns is ready to hunt, said Toza Mindev. All praise to the machine god. Abhani Lus Mahana reported similarly from the Os Rubrum. All praise, we're ready to walk. Abhani Luz's voice raised conflicting emotions in Esha as it always did. She put aside her feelings. Her daughter was a good Principe. Second Maniple respectfully requesting status of attached fourth Maniple engine. Esha voxed to Durana Fall. We are ready, Fall said. The dreamlike savagery in her voice suggested she had already achieved union with her Reaver Titan, Steel Huntress. We walk to your command. Time to drop. 2 minutes, whispered the officious voice of the ship. Esha, said Yaha loud. They had known each other for so long and so intimately, the use of anything other than their first names during Manifold Link would have been discourteous. The link is failing, said Yaha. We're losing bond coherency. Esha felt it. Power was slipping from her grasp. She forced her mental grip tighter, and Domina ex Venari bridled at her. The reactor whined in resistance. Domina has slept too long and she's angry at us for making her wait for war, said Esha. But she will rise to my command. She pushed herself against the machine's resistance down towards its blazing heart. Domina ex Venari! Esha voiced in her mind and aloud at the same time. Awake! Your hounds are ready! The hunt awaits! The Titan had no voice of its own, but it could make itself understood. No, it felt. Esha constructed a mental image within the manifold. She saw herself floating in the air over a lake of fire, the dress and unbound hair of her avatar whipped about in the heat. The Titan was too powerful to be represented by a human form. It was the lake of fire. She stared at a vortex of molten iron, turning below her feet. The heat of Domina ex Venari's being was tremendous, but fearlessly she looked into the axis of the vortex, and through it into the eye of the machine god himself. I command you, Great One, awake! War comes! War is here! Domina ex Venari's soul stirred. She felt it within her head. Her hands twitched involuntarily in the emergency manual handles. In her mind, she saw Domina's waking state as an increase of speed to the vortex's rotation. The Titan was rousing, not yet awake, but Esha had saved the best for last. The old foe is near. Legio Vulpa walks. A bellow of rage issued from the Titan's soul, represented as a pillar of fire that jetted from the vortex. Esha experienced a sensation of something huge moving beneath her skin, turning over within her bones like an earthquake or water pushed up by a rising behemoth. If those feelings could be internalized within a human body, the pressure grew, pushing the mentally constructed image of herself upwards. The lake of fire rose quicker than she. Its fire licked at her feet and devoured her. She was laughing at her as her mind was subsumed into the Titans. Esha snapped back into her body. The power of the machine god slammed into her. She arched her back and cried out with pleasure, then edged into pain. Notification chimes sang joyfully all over the cockpit. "Domina has awoken!" shouted Mafani Ohana, possessed by the machine's eagerness to fight. "We're ready!" A little more respect. Use the correct Kent, said someone. The tone was snappy, like Yaha, but it didn't sound like her, and the words were slurred. Esha, in her new state of ecstasy, could not tell who had spoken. It could have been several of her crew speaking as one, the drifting links surging into coherency, bringing them all into union. Domina X Venari shuddered. Pistons extended in joints, fiber muscles contracted under armored plates. Gyroscopes spun faster and faster. Pipes tautened with pressurized fluid. The machine shifted at its birth clamps, standing tall, setting its shoulders. Lights came on all over its body. Its defense las cannons and heavy bolters stood erect in their cupolas. The subsidiary machine spirits controlling them, suddenly, murderously alert, panning back and forth for minor threats to neutralize. Esha's back relaxed. She sank in her chair with a groan. Dominex Venari shared her pleasure. Metal squealed as the Titan shifted in the restraints of its maintenance cradle. Let me drink some water. Reactor at 100% efficiency, voxed Omega 6. All systems are running to the perfect fulfillment of sacred equations. All praise the machine god. All praise his omnisire who walks among us. All praise the motive force which moveth all things. 1 minute to combat drop, said the ship's voice. Oh, that tech voice really takes it out of me. But it's fun. It's fun to do. It's a strain. Only a minute had passed while she summoned the spirit of the god engine. Hours had been compressed into those 60 short seconds. Esha looked through her own eyes and the Titan's eyes as one, and the same time, and nothing felt amiss. A heartbeat within her that was many times larger than her body, and hot as the core of a sun. She was in full union with her machine. Alarms howled in the Titan. The ground crews were scurrying for the exits. Lights flashed. There was no air in the hangar, and the tiny people moved about in silence. By the time the enemy burned their way through the hull, Esha was no longer quite herself. A fall of molten metal pattered down from the dropship ceiling, followed by a streak of color. Domina X Venari's eyes caught the falling object, slowed it to visibility for Esha to see. A Mechanicum Honest Kadari drop tank. Its legs wrapped around itself for impact protection, bounced onto the floor, rolled to a stop and unfurled. 3 more followed. They raised gun rigs like scorpions raising their tails. Mandible doors splayed wide, disgorging racks from which a dozen Phaloxii dropped like seeds ejected from a pod. They too unfolded with mechanical precision and marched towards Steel Huntress. I'll take care of them, voxed Jahani Jahan matter-of-factly. Her Titan, Cursor Pharaoh, was moving dangerously at its drop lock, straining to be off the leash. Negative, leave them. Esha voxed back. Docking clamps were disengaging all around the dropship, the force of the decoupling enough to be felt through the plasteel of the ship. Do not engage! 20 seconds to drop! She should not have to say that to Jahani. The Titans could not fight in the hangar. Her second was letting herself be dragged under by her machine's anger. A writhing beam of blue and white energy licked out from the drop tank, slashing a black line over Steel Huntress's livery. The void shields were inoperative, the Titan bound, but they were not powerless. The point defense guns mounted their bodies, stabbed beams at the Thalaxii, skewering them as neatly as a Magos biologist would pin an example of some alien insect to a board. Las cannons were not an anti-infantry weapon, but when fired by the dozens, they did a passable job. Domina Exvenari took part in this clinical slaughter. Esha experienced the Titan's annoyance. She shared its desire to stamp forward and crush the invaders flat, to erase them from existence with its primary weapons, and move out to fight a worthy foe. Esha pushed back. No, not now. You know not now. Drop launch, whispered the ship's voice. There was a lurch. The Titans banged against their restraints. The Thalaxii staggered. The firing of the massive engines on the underside shook the craft, even against so feeble a gravity well as generated by the Theta Garmin 5 orbitals. Landing so much mass was complex and required enormous expenditures of energy. Doors opened all along the dropship. Cyborg troops poured from the barracks built into the hull, where they slept like bees in cells. The lights of these interstitial spaces flickered rapidly as the troops were awakened by massive bursts of combat stims and deployed into battle from suspension pods, which dropped down from storage to doors in the walls. The first dozen were cut down, but the ship carried 1,000 and they poured in. A battle unfolded about the Titan's feet. Plasma trails crisscrossed the floors as the Thalaxii's attentions were diverted from their targets. The fight was of no more interest to Esha than the wars of beetles, though Domina Exvenari was irritated by them. Let the Auxilia take care of them, Esha said, as much for Domina Exvenari's benefit as for her maniple's principe. Prepare for combat! The dropship angled slightly. It shook to the pounding of unseen guns. Domina Exvenari's center of gravity shifted as the ship took a long, wide curve towards its landing zone. There was a steep descent. Titan battle plates squealed against padded clamps. The great machine shook, blurring both sets of Esha's perceptions. A rambling made itself heard through the fabric of the craft. The ship pitched. A great hole blew through the wall, sending debris cutting through the tiny combatants still warring around Os Rubrum and Cursor Pharaoh. Luckily, neither Titan was hit. Through the breach, the dazzling pyrotechnics of Void War blazed. The ship shook with conflicting gravitic forces, and Esha's teeth rattled, but she was calm. This was a long way from the worst drops she had experienced. And then it was over. An impact jarred everyone aboard. The Titans sank to their knees, and the cyborg combatants were sent sprawling. The doors on the prow and aft of the dropship began to open on vast curved hinges. The Manipul had to move quickly. They were vulnerable now to counterattack. Titans died in their landing craft, but the doors moved so slowly. The doors finished their painful opening. Restraints fell away from arms, legs, and torsos. Cable linkages dropped. Outside, a fearsome bombardment rained down from the Legio fleet, keeping whatever enemy was out there back from the landing zone. Legio first, Esha said. Legio Solaria walks! The Manipul exited the craft, picking their way through the insignificant melee taking place on the deck. The Warhounds ran free. Os Rubrum, Cursor Pharaoh, and Procul Videns, then Velix Canis last. They filed out, already spreading into a hunting pattern. Gathering speed, the low gravity exaggerating each pace into a bounding stride. Esha needed no words to set her Titan going. She simply walked. She felt Jeffadier Jahan's psyche below hers, like a ledge on a rock face holding her up as she climbed for the heights of victory. The sensation was fleeting. She was Domina ex Venari. Jeffadier Jahan was simply another part of her. Rockets already streaked from the Apocalypse launcher set upon her carapace. Domina ex Venari marched to war with Steel Huntress at her side. Whew. Chapter 7, Legio Volpa Walks. Take a break. This is probably where we'll be wrapping up for the stream, since we're just at about 2 hours and it's a lot of talking, and we got a good transition point having finished chapter 6. I hope everyone enjoyed it and was having fun listening in for this as our Titans get ready to really get into the quote-unquote shit. Yeah, this is getting spicy. This is getting real spicy. Let me just pause the music. Okay. Well, I hope everybody's doing good. Soon we're gonna get the other perspective of the evil Titans, and that should be spicy. Have a real mecha v mecha battle going on here. So yeah, thank you guys for coming by today. I hope it was fun. I hope you enjoyed the shenanigans and evil Titans. That'll be it for today. Tomorrow we'll be back for, I think, probably the final session of our solo D&D campaign. Okay, Zeph, I appreciate it. I also have the first VOD up on my YouTube if you want to listen to that. And then this weekend I'll upload this VOD as well. So you always have the opportunity to hear more. So tomorrow we're going to be doing solo D&D. If you haven't done so already, please give me a follow here on Twitch. Give me a sub over on YouTube. Give me a follow on Twitter. Or not Twitter. Follow on Blue Sky. And you can join my Discord, the Eternal Citadel, and be a part of my incredible community. I want you all to know you're all beautiful, amazing, and valid people, and I hope you enjoyed spending your afternoon with me nearly as much as I enjoyed spending it with you. And never forget the most important part, which is the world is better having you in it. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. We're not going to be starting Baldur's Gate this week because I have a electrolysis appointment Thursday, so we're just doing the streams on Tuesday and Wednesday. Alrighty. If you are a follower, please copy down the call to hugs for our raid message. If you're a sub, please copy down the knight's message. We're gonna raid little Thomas the Tactician. He's a little wolf boy knight, member of our community, playing critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV. Tactician. I think that's how you do his name. Yep. Alright, so let's go send Thomas some love. And I hope you guys have an awesome day. Know that you're all good beans, and there is a little goth lady somewhere out there who thinks you're pretty neat. Bye!